Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today, I want to tell you about the Great Fire of London, which swept through London streets in 1666. It destroyed a lot of our old city, particularly buildings which had existed since medieval times. The fire actually started in a street called Pudding Lane on the 2nd of September. Now, it's interesting because if you go to Pudding Lane today, there's a big monument which was built by Sir Christopher Wren. I'm not sure if you can still go inside it and go to the top of it, but when I was a boy, it was open to the public. It's like a little tower. You know, it was fashionable in those days to build little tower monuments that you could walk inside, go up a staircase until you get to the top, and then you can take some photos. I don't think you can do that anymore in Pudding Lane, but yeah, there's a monument there. So if you're ever coming to London, don't forget to have a look. By the way, if you are ever coming to London, go to Waterloo Bridge near Waterloo Station because there's some lovely views. So it's a nice place to take your camera. You can look down the Thames and see St. Paul's Cathedral. And looking the other way, you can view Westminster. It's a lovely, lovely area. But anyway, getting back to this fire, which started in Pudding Lane, as you can imagine, there weren't very many firefighting techniques in those days. So this fire lasted for, I think, 5 or 6 days, but it destroyed a lot of old London. Initially, people thought it had been caused by immigrants, so it caused a lot of street violence, but it soon became clear that it was actually started, not deliberately, but it was started in a bakery on Pudding Lane. Of course, the wind made it worse, and it became a firestorm. And it pushed north into the heart of the city. There were a lot of people on the streets, and as people were blaming immigrants for the fire, they started to fight. And the fire spread nearly over the whole city. It even destroyed St. Paul's Cathedral, and it went all the way up to, I think, Whitehall, where our government buildings are now. It was a big battle to put that fire out, and the Tower of London, as you know, has a strong protection around it. So they were able to use that to stop it spreading. What's very interesting is there was a man living at that time. His name was Samuel Pepys, and he started to record what he was seeing in his diary. And Samuel Pepys' diary became one of the most evidential accounts of the fire, where it went and what it did. His diary is free online. You can even receive quotes from it daily if you want. He became very synonymous with the Great Fire of London, Samuel Pepys' diary, because it's one of the only existing documents which talks about what was happening at the time. The king wasn't popular in those days. There was a lot of fighting between the government and the royals. So the king was giving orders about what should happen, and everyone just ignored them, I think. He wanted a lot of the buildings to be pulled down and he went down the Thames on his boat to view what was happening. And I think people were just doing their own thing. The rich, of course, wanted to move their belongings out, whereas a lot of the poorer people just had to run for their lives. And they couldn't believe how quickly it was actually spreading. Bizarrely, not many people actually died, or at least none are really recorded. There was a lot of fear that this fire was the work of foreign terrorists, and people thought maybe that other countries were about to invade. And this was really on people's minds. But I suppose when you go through something like that, you know, when your whole city is burning down, the first thing you think of is that it's being invaded. So there was a lot of talk that it was a French invasion or a Dutch invasion. And there was a lot of really heightened fears because of this. Only a few deaths from the fire are actually officially recorded, but nobody really knows because, of course, records would have been destroyed as well. But yeah, a few people died from smoke inhalation. The London Gazette, which was an old newspaper, it didn't record any fatalities. It said that everyone was fine, which seems a bit strange. I'm sure in an area like that with such poor sanitation, some people would have almost certainly died. I'm sure of that. But anyway, there were a few famous people who apparently passed away in the fire. One was a famous writer called James Shirley. And of course, rumors started that only people of certain religions or foreigners were being rescued by the royals. Now, of course, looking back and looking at the records now, all of that is completely fake news. But I guess that's what happens in a disaster, isn't it? I mean, the heat alone must have killed people, never mind the fire or the smoke. And some people say that the heat was strong enough to actually destroy skeletons. So that might be why they think not many people died, because there would be absolutely no remains. The material destruction apparently was around 13,500 houses, 87 churches, including St. Paul's Cathedral, Customs House, Royal Exchange, Bridewell Palace, and other city prisons. The monetary value was around 10 million. Remember, this was in 1666, so very interesting, very interesting. And of course, there were investigations. Residents after the fire were still maintaining that this was because London had too many foreigners, particularly the French and the Dutch for some reason were blamed. And they actually had trained people which were put on guard who were arresting foreigners around England to try to find out if this was some kind of conspiracy. And this is a great example of how some people use scapegoats. Scapegoats. A scapegoat is someone you blame just to take responsibility. You know, sometimes when a bad thing happens, we need a scapegoat. We need someone to say, okay, this is because of that man, you know. And apparently, one of the scapegoats was Robert Hubert, who was a simple French watchmaker, and they presumably tortured him, and he confessed to being a member of a gang that started the Great Fire. He said that it was started in Westminster. Of course, he was wrong. And then when he found out that it had started in Pudding Lane, he changed his story. They convicted him anyway. I mean, they didn't seem to believe him. He wasn't well educated. He was a little bit, what we say, simple. That just means a little bit uneducated. But anyway, they convicted him. They were worried about his mental health, but still they hanged him on 29th of October 1666 because they wanted to find somebody that was responsible for this fire and blame them. You know, our human minds, sometimes we want to find a reason, a person, a thing, to say, okay, this all happened because of this man. And it's very sad. So yeah, they got this French watchmaker and they hanged him at Tyburn. If you've ever been to Hyde Park, that's just at the front of Hyde Park on, where can I say, what road is that called in front of Hyde Park? I don't remember the name of the road in front of Hyde Park, but just by Marble Arch, there's a road goes all the way along to, I think it goes along to Green Park. So that's Tyburn. There's a monastery there, Tyburn Monastery. A group of nuns live in there. You can go and visit that. And they have a museum downstairs about saints who were hanged at Tyburn. Tyburn was a place where you hanged people, and it was there for many, many years. So anyway, they hanged this man called Robert Hubert, and it became very clear after his death that he had actually been on a ship when the fire broke out, so it couldn't possibly have been him. He hadn't arrived in London until 2 days after the fire started. Robert Hubert became very famous because of this, because of his fake confession. And you can read all about him on Wikipedia. He has his own Wikipedia site, of course. It was hoped that with Hubert's death, the talk of plots and conspiracies might die with him. That's what they said in 1667. But unfortunately, as you know, with the amount of news we're given every day, that we still tend to blame people for events which we just don't have any reasons for. Anyway, that's just one example of a scapegoat. Then, of course, the aftermath, they started to find out what happened, and they wanted to know how to prevent it in the future. So they set up a special fire court in 1667, which was dealing with disputes between tenants and landlords and who was going to pay for what. And there was a lot of unhappiness at that time. And one of the things which, of course, happened because of the Great Fire is that London changed. After that, they built St. Paul's Cathedral again. They built different streets. So yeah, they started to rebuild. And these streets had new fire regulations. So very, very interesting. There was lots of poetry came out of this, as well as religious sermons. Very interesting. It seemed to have a great impact on the minds of the people. And of course, the man who rebuilt St. Paul's Cathedral was Sir Christopher Wren, and you can see his work all around London. He's designed quite a few famous buildings around London, such as Kensington Palace, the monument to the Great Fire, which sits in Pudding Lane. As I mentioned earlier, when I was a boy, you could go inside that and walk to the top of it, but I don't think you can do that anymore. Oh, look at the time. I'm up to 15 minutes, so I better go. So that's it from me, The Great Fire of London. I hope you've enjoyed this. Do remember to download the Diary of Samuel Pepys. Very interesting read. Hard to read, though, because it's in Old English, but if you can find a modern version, it'll be much easier, even for us. Okay, see you. Bye.